thumbs up, that will be fine. Yeah, all right. Thanks, Jamie. Okay, Raisha as well. Great. Thanks, everybody. All right. Well, everyone, good afternoon, good evening. I know it's already it's the session is for Asia and the Pacific, so it's already afternoon, early evening, your time in your part of the world. So thanks for joining us. Welcome to this session on a visual storytelling. We're delighted to have you join us for this exciting session that we have put together. In response to the feedback we got from CBI member networks during our global meeting here in Istanbul last year. The feedback we got is to support CBI member networks when it comes to comms training and storytelling. So today's session, while it is a photo training session, it's not just about taking good photos, but we know that even though a photo paints 1,000 words, we want to make sure that at the end of the day is hopefully this session will help us collectively improve the way we tell our stories, because I'm not sure about you, but I do know that people love stories. Okay. And we're joined today by Charlotte Kans, who worked for 15 years as a multimedia journalist for Agence France Presse, or AFP, before joining OCHA, or the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, in 2015. We're very happy and fortunate to have her and have her share her wisdom and expertise in this session. And she is in charge of OCHA's special multimedia projects and photography approaches and efforts. Before anything else, and before I hand it over to Charlotte, who will be guiding us through this storytelling and photo training session, just to go to the next slide. And I know that just to help us frame this photo training session a little bit, if we can go to the next slide, Nara. Oh, okay. All right. So, well, this is not the slide I wanted to show, but maybe if I can just share my screen. Sorry, this was not updated. Nara, I'm just going to show my screen before we go to this slide. Okay. Why are we doing this? This slide shows a photo of when CBI was launched 8 years ago. So this is for the benefit of Charlotte, as well as some of our newcomer colleagues here who are not so familiar with the story of CBI. So we're already 8 years old. We had our birthday, our 8th birthday in May, when we were launched during the World Humanitarian Summit held in Istanbul, Turkey. That photo, I'm not sure if it tells a great story about CBI. And I keep on, and I tell my colleagues, the team and everyone here, like, where are the photos good photos when CBI was launched, right? Because it was a milestone. It was a fantastic milestone on when UN agencies, UNDP, and OCHA, and as well as hundreds of business partners and humanitarian agencies came together and said, we need to do things better in involving private sector actors such as yourselves when we talk about humanitarian action and efforts. I kept on asking, so did we have other good photos when CBI was launched? Because this is the only thing we have. It's blurry, it doesn't really tell anything. So hopefully I'm using this not to poke fun at how we did it 8 years ago, but to sort of serve as an inspiration that us for CBI our strength is really defined by the stories that we tell and how we also support you and work with you better in providing that platform to showcase the amazing work that you do, the fantastic engagement that you have with your government counterparts, with your partners from the UN, as well as with the communities that you serve. So at the end of the day, while this is a photo training session, hopefully this will also help us not to just learn how to take good photos, but also to collectively help us share our stories better, so that we may be able to serve the people that we serve, that we want to serve, and also showcase the importance of engaging with local businesses such as yourselves when it comes to disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. I'm using this just as a context. I'm going to stop talking now and I'm going to hand it over to Charlotte, who's going to walk us through this journey, of hopefully making us not just good photographers, but also good storytellers. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Riza, for the introduction. And I think it's good that you indeed showed this photo. We're going to go over a number of examples in the session. And I think one of them is going to be on those typical meeting photos that we definitely want to move away from for the reasons that you've outlined, Riza. So I'm going to get started, and I would love this session to be to have some interactive parts. We can't make it interactive throughout, but please be ready also to intervene. Because it's really interesting to have your, points of views, your perspectives, and also to make sure that at the end, we will have some time for questions and answers. So let's get started. Why do we take photos? The saying indeed says that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I feel that, a bit like a superhero, photography has many special powers. Because indeed, it can inspire, it can educate, it can horrify, and it can compel viewers into action. And sometimes it does that with just one single image. Measuring the impact of a photo is always very difficult, and it's always very debated and debatable. But I think you all know some of the very famous, images from the Vietnam War, for example, or the photo of remember a couple of years ago, the little Syrian boy, Alan Kurdi, who, was photographed, washed out on a beach, and, his little dead body with his little clothes, and how this particular photo really triggered, I think really, I'm going to say triggered, at least participated in triggering a really strong wake-up call in Europe with the Syrian refugee crisis. So to me, indeed, this is not a meaningless saying. It is true. A picture has incredible power. And we're going to go through this, this session and go through the different aspects of it. As you said also, Riza, in the introduction, and that's why it was good to see that photo, a photo embodies a wide range of things. It embodies emotions, it embodies moods, it embodies narratives, ideas, messages, all of these, which are key elements in a good story and in the art of storytelling. There's another interesting thing for me with photos is that it freezes a moment in time. And that's especially true if you compare it with video. Video film is wonderful. I do a lot of it. But what I love with photography is that it allows you as the viewer to think, react, and feel in your own way. Like you can take 2 seconds to look at a photo. You can take 3 minutes to look at a photo. You can go back to the photo 10 times if you want to. It really gives you, as the viewer, full agency over what you're looking at. And I think in this day and age, where we're all bombarded with social media content, which is, more and more, which is faster and faster, which is, you know, snappier and snappier, and which is basically this kind of snowball rolling, and that we feel we can't stop. Photography is really key in that sense, because it allows you to stop and think. And that's absolutely crucial. The other thing that, you know, photography does, and that we want to do with our photography, of course, is indeed to help demonstrate the impact and the challenges of our work. And it's not just, I think there's something which is missing in this line. It's not just the impact of our work, which is indeed, you know, what is it that we do, what are the challenges that we face, and trying to, you know, illustrate them, but it also helps us give an identity to the people caught up in crisis and the people we're trying to help. You know, it allows us to tell who they are, what they aspire to, what are their challenges. It allows us to show their faces, to show their emotions, to show the context in which they live. So really, basically, it allows us to give an identity to the people caught up in crisis. And that's why, you know, again, for the work we do as OCHA, as CBI, the work that you all do, it's absolutely critical. If we go to the next slide, Nara. So I'm very often asked, what is a good photo, or what is a strong photo? And as you can imagine, there is no simple or straightforward answer to that, and for many reasons. First of all, because good or strong is very subjective. It will depend on your audience. It will depend on the cultural norms of the society where, you know, where you're working. It will depend on your goal. It will depend on the story format. It will depend on the platform you publish on. You know, like a photo that is meant for fundraising is not the same as a photo that you use in an editorial context, for example. You know, the platform also has a huge influence. A photo that you use for Instagram is not the same as a photo you put in a report. So, you know, all of these things obviously come into what we define as a good or as a strong photo. That being said, there are indeed some elements, thankfully, that you know, come back when we talk about strong photography, and that are good to keep in mind when you're working with photography. So there are, first of all, I'm going to give you a couple of generic pointers in terms of what it is that we're looking for. And this is what you see on this slide. We're looking for dignity. We're looking for action. We're looking for emotions, as we said earlier, and we're looking for diversity of the people we photograph and of the, you know, the thematics we photograph. And positive messages are key because, you know, it helps us show again the people that we help and the people that we engage with. So it says it here at the end of the slide: avoid static photos of people posing at meetings, which is the exact example you gave, Riza, at the beginning. But we're going to go back to that. If you go to the next slide, Nara, yeah. So there are also some technical pointers which are good to keep in mind, and we're going to go through them right now. These are like kind of key visual elements that come back into with, you know, in strong photography, and these are color and light, action and movement, perspective, and then composition, which is either the rule of thirds or the symmetry. So now I would love for us to do a small exercise, because the way that you get better at photography is by training your eyes. And training your eyes mean looking at as much photography as you can. And you can do this, we're going to do this together now, but you can do this, you know, in your daily life. Just, you know, whenever you see a photo, just take the time to ask yourself, oh, do I like this photo? What do I like about this photo? What does it make me feel? What are the key elements that, you know, that I see immediately when I look at it? And if you want to get better at photography, you can do that as you know, as a daily practice. Every time you see a photo, just, you know, taking the time to reflect on what you're seeing. So now I'm going to run through a number of photos. And what I would love for you to do is, and you can either shout it out and put your microphones on, or maybe you can put it in the chat. But I would, you know, we're going to go quite fast. So I'm going to spend maybe 10, 15 seconds max per image. And I would love for you to tell me what are the most striking elements that you see in the photo, like really quickly, you know, like, again, very spontaneous reactions. So just, again, shout them out, put them in the chat, and we're just going to start going through the images. Okay, Nara, I think we can go to this one. Okay, so this first image, what is the first thing that strikes you when you look at it? Anyone? What is it that you see immediately right now? To me, I'm gonna get going, and then I hope you're gonna catch up on it. For me, it's the color. Like immediately you see this big blue wall, and then you get the pink of the headscarf of the lady. So that's for me the first thing that comes to my mind when I see this photo is the color, right? And then this lady in orange. Yeah, same thing for you, Riza, the color, and the lady in orange on the right hand side. So here, color. Next slide. Again, remember, there's no good or bad. It's not a matter of, what is good, what is bad, is what you see. The smile, exactly. Thank you. The smile. So what is the smile? The smile is an emotion, right? Again, there's something immediately, you've got the color as well, this bright pink that kind of jumps to your face, but the smile, the tenderness, right? You immediately, you see this photo and you feel, motherly love, you feel tenderness between the whom we think is the mother and the little girl in her arms, right? So again, emotion, positive messaging, immediate emotional reaction. This is really important. Next slide. What is the one thing that, again, that you see here? Movement. Thank you. Action, wind, dust. Exactly. This is the first thing that you see. Like it's a very active, in the moment photo, right? It's not a static one. You feel you're there with the helicopter landing. You feel the wind and the dust in your face. So action and movement are also really key elements to keep in mind when you're looking at photography. And if you can achieve that, all the better. It's not easy, but you're looking for that. Next slide. Flood, yes, exactly. So context, you immediately understand the context of what you're looking at. We are talking about people who have been affected by flood. So excellent, you see it immediately. Emotion, distress, yes. The woman's expression, yes. So you see people, you immediately see the context, which is floods. You see the people who are being affected, which are the people walking in the water, and you see them moving. So again, you've got an active photo. It's a photo with action and movement. It's not a static photo. It's not someone sitting on the floor and looking at you, right? So again, action, movement, context, people being helped, key elements that we're always looking for in photography. If we go to the next slide. Relief, solidarity, gratitude, feeling, exactly, right? You got it all. Kindness. So you immediately, again, with this photo, see what it is that in this case these humanitarians are doing. They are helping someone, and you've got an emotion coming out of it. As you said, you've got kindness, you've got solidarity, you've got gratitude. So again, immediately you see that, you understand what it's about. It's about helping people. You see a bit of the context behind, right? Probably an earthquake. And then you've got an emotion when you look at the photo. So again, this happens really fast, as you noticed, right? We're talking about a couple of seconds here. You don't need to spend too much time, and you immediately get, the key elements within the photo. Next slide. What do we have here? Waiting, right? I think, Peter, you put waiting for this one. Yes, indeed. She looks, she seems to be, waiting. There's something else as well that is, to me, quite immediate when you look at it. Natural lighting. Thank you, Rochelle. Indeed, you've got this beautiful yellow kind of, glowing sun behind her. So the lighting on this photo is perfect. There's a beautiful natural light to it. And again, if you were to see that, whether you look at it in a report or whether you're scrolling on your Twitter feed or Instagram feed, the color is going to grab your attention. The lighting is going to grab your attention and hopefully make you stop in your tracks and kind of, stop, pause, look at the photo, look at the caption, look at what is written with it. So yes, indeed, color. Next one. Space, yeah, definitely. Symmetry, yes, he's on the right. Do you feel anything looking at this photo? I doubt it. I doubt that you feel anything because you can't see anything really, right? So versus the previous photo where we had a beautiful light and where you could see the woman's face and you had this kind of, you all said she's waiting, a bit of despair, etc. On this photo, it's like if you manage to see the face of the man, good on you, because it's really hard to see. Again, here you've got an issue which is more of a technical issue than anything, which is that you've got, the man is under a tree, so the light on his face is very different from the light in the background, where there's a lot of sun. And this is something that happens, bad light. This is something that happens very often with the countries we work in and the places we work in, especially because very often also we end up being there like towards midday when the sun is the strongest. And this is obviously an issue because you need to balance, to make a choice between seeing the background correctly, having a correct exposition for your background, which is the case here. Like the trees are fine, you can see the landscape basically. But because you can see the landscape where the light is really strong, as a result, you cannot see the man's face because he is underexposed. There is not enough light on his face. So in this case, you would have to make a choice. Either you go for the background to see the background correctly, or you go for the man's face and you decide to see the man's face correctly. It can depend on whatever you want to achieve. But here, I find it really problematic that we cannot see the man's face. So I would have gone for a more close-up version of the photo with like proper lighting on the man's face so I can see what he actually looks like. Because again, emotions can come from landscapes, but very often also they come from like human beings. So again, here it's a good example of a bad lighting situation where you have to make a choice, because right now, as a result, this photo doesn't make me feel anything. And I'm a bit lost. I'm not really sure what I'm looking at. If we go to the next slide. So here I'm gonna help you a little bit with it, and also for the sake of time. But here again, it's in the same series of light. Is like, this is okay, right? You can see the child's face, but what you can see on the child's face though is that you can see all these shadows. Like his nose is bright, the rest of his face is kind of in the shadow. And this is typical of, again, midday sun photographs, because again, this image was probably taken at midday. The sun is right above the boy's face, and as a result, it projects some shadows on his face. So this is like, I put it here for you to kind of think of, whenever you take photos, remember that the time of the day is pretty critical. Ideally, and if you work with professional photographers, you're going to see that they always prefer to work early in the morning or late in the afternoon, because these are the two times of the day where the light is the best, because you avoid those kind of shadows on the face of a person. So if you have a choice, try to pivot to, make sure that you go early morning or late afternoon. It's not always possible. Quite often you end up being there like at 11 a.m. and you leave at like 3 p.m. So you've got like the worst hours of the day. But if that's the case, remember again, just be conscious of it and try to then place your subjects. For example, this boy, if he had been in a place with a bit more shadow, he wouldn't have had the shadows on his face. So it's again more like for being conscious of it, and for you to make sure that if you have a choice, you would rather go early morning or mid-morning and late afternoon. If we go to the next slide. What strikes you in this image? Color, exactly. Linear, thank you. Exactly. There's a bit of, so 100% action as well. Yes, they are walking. Again, they are not static. So you can see here the linear composition. Indeed, there's a bit of a pattern, right? It's like as if, you know, they all go like they're all straight like this. It gives you kind of almost a rhythm to the photograph. And this is something that you can always keep at the back of your mind when you take photos. It's like try to look for visual elements like lines, patterns that repeat themselves, because they help create rhythm and movement, and they give energy basically to your photography. So this is something that's always good to keep in mind. If we go to the next one. What strikes you in this image? There's one overwhelming visual element in this image. Perspective, yeah. The perspective is interesting because the photographer is above, right? He's not at the same level as the ladies crossing the road. And I just said it, the road. Thank you, Raisha. Indeed, the road, right? It's like this huge line that cuts across the photography. So this in photography, we call them directing lines. And these are, again, visual elements that help give a rhythm and an energy to your photo. So here, like the photographer, you know, this photo was taken by a professional photographer, actually. You can see that, you know, you've got this big line of the road, and then you've got the ladies crossing, you know, almost perpendicular to the directing line of the photography. And then you've got this color as well, because you've got the yellow of the woman on the road, which also matches the yellow lines on the road. So there's, you know, lots of different elements that, you know, that play well together in this photo. But indeed, the perspective being above and the directing line, like the energy that the road gives to the image is really interesting. If we go to the next one. Anyone on this one? Yeah, feel free. I'm not sure what you want to say, Peter, but yeah, space, yeah. So you see all the jerry cans, right? You've got the color, obviously, a lot of yellow. So again, very colorful image. It kind of jumps to your face, and hopefully, again, as we said, when you've got color, it's like, you know, it helps stop you in your tracks. It's a bit like, you know, insects looking for flowers. You know that insects go for the bright flowers. Well, we're the same. Like you would go for a bright image. It's like it catches your attention immediately. So you've got all these, like this yellow color of the jerry can, and again the composition, right? It's like you've a bit like the road just earlier. You've got this directing line, like it gives, again, it frames the photography and it gives energy to the photography. So next one. Anyone on this one? Eagle view. Thank you, Peter. Bird's eyes. Exactly, Jamie. Exactly. So here again, this is a drone image. So we don't all, you know, have drones, but you can see how it's kind of interesting because it gives you a very different viewpoint. And then yes, you see the landscape, the beautiful landscape. This photo was taken in Congo. So you see the beautiful hills of Congo, and you see this, which is a displacement camp at the top of the mountain. And obviously, this perspective, you only have it if you go high above, right? So in this case, you would need a drone, but you know, just remembering to think about the perspective and the angle and the viewpoint on your image is really critical. If we go to the next one. It's a bit of the same here, right? Again, the photographer went higher, went above ground. And as a result, you've got this perspective on what is happening on the ground that would be very different if you were at the same level as the people who are carrying the boxes out of the helicopter. And here, as you can see as well, you've got this kind of directing lines, which are the cues that are formed by the people. You've got these three lines, right, that cut across the image. And then you've got the helicopter, you know, creating another line. So again, here you've got a number of different elements as well, and you've got the action and the movement. So again, you can see that a strong image usually, you know, has very many different good elements to it. It has action, it has movement, it has color. It doesn't need to have them all, but usually it has a few of them. If we go to the next one. Same again, right? Perspective. I've put them all three there just to show you that it doesn't mean that you need to have a drone to get a different viewpoint, right? So here, it was just a matter of going on the little, whatever, not even a hill, but the little slope that was next to the displacement camp and taking the photos from there, because there you can see the displacement camp kind of sprawling in the background. And on top of that, you've got the kids at the forefront of the image. So you know what you're looking at. You're looking at people who are being displaced. If we go to the next slide. So all that to say again, and this image kind of embodies and summarizes it all, perspective matters. You can see here on the left-hand side, this is the image that is taken. It's the same action, it's the same event. The image on the left-hand side, it's a photographer. It's one of the photographers that you see on the right that is behind the little fire. So if you were to see only the image on the left-hand side, you think it's a massive fire. And then you see the Arc of Triomphe in Paris in the background. And you're like, oh my God, Paris is on fire. The revolts are happening. But if you see the image on the right, you realize that, it's actually a very small fire and that the photographers are all trying to get the fire at the forefront. So again, this is to say that when you take a photo, you make a choice. You decide to frame one aspect of reality versus another. You are deciding what makes sense in the reality around you. And so again, with this photo, you can see how important it is that you have to make sure that you stay true to the reality. Everything is always an interpretation, but you have to make sure that you're not distorting the reality, as with the image on the left, and you're staying true to what it is that you're seeing. If we go to the next slide. Okay, what strikes you in this image? Center, thank you, exactly. She's right in the center of the image. So we were talking about composition very early on in the first slide when I was telling you there are different kind of technical elements to an image. Composition is one of them. So at the beginning, I think, depending what level you are as a photographer, but to avoid taking any risk, there are two rules that can help you. The first one is the rule of symmetry, which we see here, which is that in order to get a good balance with your image, place your character or whatever is the point of interest right in the center of your frame. That is an interesting composition approach. And it kind of, again, gives you a good natural balance to your image. If we go to the next one. Again, right? The boy is right in the center. So again, here in this photo, not only do you have a good composition, like he's right in the middle, but obviously you've got also the background, the destroyed background, which gives you information as to, what is the situation this boy is in. And then you've got the cat for cat lovers, which is always a plus. Everybody loves a good cat photo. So you've got a different number of different elements. If we go to the next slide. Again, she's right in the center. But again, as you can see, there are different elements to this photography that you can see immediately when you look at it, that we've been talking about earlier. Color, right? She's got this kind of good pink scarf that again grabs your eye. A bit of context. You can see in the background some tents, and you can understand, by looking at it, that she's probably a displaced child, right? And then what else do you have? I mean, for me, when I look at this photo, it's one of my, by the way, it's one of my favorite Ocha photos. And I love it because I love the way she looks at you. I love that she looks straight at you and she's got a bit of a defiant attitude, confidence, exactly. She's not scared of the photographer, and she's almost like, as if she's defying you, right? And again, I find it interesting because because of the work we're doing, very often we show people at them, you know, I mean, not very often, we work with people at their most vulnerable. And as a result, there's a tendency to picture them as, you know, needy and powerless, etc. Which, you know, again, they are facing difficult circumstances, and we need to speak to those circumstances that they're facing. But they are not just the circumstances that they're facing. They are also unique human beings, as we said at the beginning, who have, you know, hopes and who are strong and who have dreams. And finding a way to show that in our photography is really important. And we're going to come back to this in a moment. If we go to the next one. So this one, I think, I don't know if you can play, Nara, if there's a way you can play this video for like just 1 minute, because, you know, Wes Anderson, a number of you might know him. Is it possible to do that, Nara and Riza? I don't know. I should have maybe warned you in advance, but.
I'm gonna check that just a second.
Okay, but just to tell you, guys, that, you know, I mean, Wes Anderson, a number of you might know him. He's a very famous film director, and he's got a very particular and unique approach to his filming. And as you will see in the video, if we manage to play it, otherwise I'll put the link in the chat and you can watch it later on. He always centers his characters and the key elements in the film. And it's really interesting to see that, because he's the only filmmaker I know who does that, and it makes his approach completely unique. But as we're talking about composition in photography, it's really interesting to see. Maybe if you click even, no, I can, if it's too complicated, Nara, I can just put the link in the chat and people can just watch it whenever it's convenient. Let me put it in the chat here, but it's really interesting for you to watch it. And we can go then to the next slide. So this image, we're talking composition. And in this image, you can see that the boy is not exactly in the middle. He's actually 2/3 to the right. And the composition that is used here is called the rule of third. And you're going to hear a lot about that, you know, if you continue doing photography. It's again a composition rule that, if you go to the next slide, Nara, because it's going to help show how it works. So basically, the rule of third involves kind of dividing up your image into thirds using 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines, as you can see here. And you then position the important elements in your scene along those lines at the points where they meet. So you've got these 4 crosses, and this is where you want to place the key elements in your photo. And as you can see here, the key elements in this photo are you know, former USG Valerie Amos on the left, and the little boy that she's kind of greeting on the bottom right. And you then even have the mother's face, you know, on the upper right corner. So the rule of third is again a kind of a safe composition technique that allows you to have a well-balanced image. And this is because, again, as we were saying, with like color, which immediately grabs your attention, symmetry, etc., naturally your eye, and you know, scientists have proven that your eye goes to these places in the photography, kind of moves from this point to that point, to you know, from the upper left to the upper right, to the bottom right, to the bottom left. It's kind of an automatic way that the human eye works when looking at an image. So when you place those elements, the key elements in your photo, in those places, it gives you a well-balanced photo. It doesn't mean, again, a rule is meant to be broken, so you don't have to do it. You know, just like symmetry, you don't have to put the character in the center. You don't have to use the rule of third. You know, rules are meant to be broken, but rules exist also for a reason, which is that, you know, it kind of simplifies your life. So if you're not quite sure how to go about making a photo, think again, symmetry, rule of thirds, and that way you're going to have a well-balanced photo. Next slide. What strikes you in this image? Anyone? Don't fall asleep, huh? Emotion. Thank you. Yes, emotion, right? You feel like you are with this elderly lady. Focus, yeah, very, very defined focus for sure. And why is the focus so good? Because also the photographer is close to the person he's taking a photo of. So, you know, the face and the eyes are the first vehicles for emotion. So when you're not sure what to photograph, you're in a place and you're not sure how to go about it, if you go for people's faces with their consent, of course, and we're going to come back to that, you know, further down, that is a safe choice, because whenever you go for faces, you're going to get a strong emotional photo. And actually, if you see, you know, all of us, sometimes when we take professional photos, we're a bit like, it can be a bit daunting, and you're like, oh gosh, I need to show this and I need to show that, and I'm not sure how to do it. But when you take photos of your friends and family, you always go for the faces, right? Like you would, if I was to look into your phone and see the photos of your children, I'm sure I would see lots of faces, lots of beautiful smiles, lots of emotion. So again, remember that it's the same for professional photography that you're going to do in the context of your job. You want people to feel something whenever they're going to look at your photos. And the photos you are going to take are the photos you want to be sharing with your friends and your family and, you know, your husband and your wife. And, you know, think of it that way. Is this a photo I would send to, again, my husband, my wife, my friend, to tell them what I'm seeing? You know, you wouldn't send them a photo of a meeting. Nobody's interested in that. You would send them a photo again of someone you met and say, oh, I met this person. It was incredible. So again, faces, faces, faces. If we go to the next slide, I think we're going to go a bit fast on the remaining slides because I'm conscious of the time. But again, here, what do you feel? Emotion, right? Emotion. You can see this elderly lady who's probably the grandmother, and she's kind of protecting the little child. Like immediately you look at this, you feel the vulnerability of the people, and you feel the urge that this old lady has to protect the little child. So again, you feel something when you see this photo immediately. It's in an instant. If we go to the next slide. Here again, right? Immediately you look at this photo, you understand. Okay, you see that this little girl has lost her leg, that she's got a prosthetic leg, and you can see the tent in the background. So again, you know, different elements that allow you to immediately understand what you're looking at and feel something. You know, you obviously feel for this little girl who has a prosthetic leg. If we go to the next one. So here it's interesting, right? Because it's a bit of the reverse of the other one with the elderly lady. You do not see the woman's face, yet you feel something when you look at this photo. You feel the devastation, right? You immediately understand that this woman, yes, hopelessness, that you immediately understand that this woman, you know, was affected by a disaster. In this case, it was the tsunami in Indonesia. Tsunami earthquake, I think. So again, you know, it's a really strong photo because it makes you understand really in an instant what it is that the people are facing and what it is that we are conveying as a situation. Next photo. Photo of a meeting or whatever that is. But as you can see here, I put it in here because always remember to be aware of the background. The photographer wanted to take a photo of the man speaking, and what do we have in the background? A man reading his newspaper. So obviously, you know, the feeling you get from this photo is that whatever the man is talking about is not very interesting, right? So again, remember to pay attention to all the different elements in your photo, look at the background, look at the foreground, make sure you have it all in your mind. If we go to the next slide. What is wrong in this photo, according to you? What doesn't work? Unwanted land space, yes. Portrait shot, yes. So you can take portrait shots, but usually we prefer to go for landscape because it gives you more options. With a landscape shot, you can always reframe it and make it vertical, focusing on certain elements. While when you have a vertical shot to start with, it's much more difficult to make it landscape. So indeed, we always, if in doubt, I mean, you can take both with a, you know, I would say you would take 80% landscape shots and maybe 20% vertical shots. But if you have to choose between the two, always, you know, horizontal gives you much more versatility. But yes, and there's something else that is to me completely wrong in this photo. Yes, the angle, the way the photographer, how far the photographer is from the people he's taking a photo of. What do we see? Like you can barely see the woman sitting on the ground. You've got all this unwanted land space, as Peter said, in the foreground, which, you know, is completely pointless. And then you've got the humanitarian worker who's standing above the person he's trying to help. So this is also something in terms of the power dynamic that we want to see. This is not exactly the feeling you want to, you know, convey to your audience about the work we're doing. It would have been much better. And we can go to the next photo. If you saw that, right? You see a humanitarian worker who's kneeling on the ground, going to the same level as the person they are talking to. So it could have been the same with the previous photo. The man could have crouched on the ground to be talking to the woman, right? That would have made the feeling and the emotion that comes out of the photo much stronger, right? And here it's, you know, it's the opposite of the photo before because you're way closer. So, you know, like, okay, it was during COVID, so she's got a mask on, but otherwise you can probably see her face and hopefully her smile. And, you know, in terms of the power dynamic that's going on, you can really see that the humanitarian worker is there to assist the child. She's helping the child. She's at the service of the child and not vice versa, looking down on the child or the person, as we saw in the photo before. You know, there's a famous photographer, Kappa, whom some of you might know, had this saying, and he used to say, if your photo is not good enough, it means you are not close enough. And this is something that you can also keep at the back of your mind. And if you see professional photographers working, you will see that they get really close to the people that they're photographing. They're not afraid to get close. Again, you will have to get consent. You will have to have a discussion before. But if you want to get strong images, as we saw, you want the face, you want the eyes, you want the emotions, very often you have to get close. If we go to the next slide. Again, I want to stress that point because this is really key. What is wrong in this photo? Yes, perspective. I've got Riza who's like reminding me on time. I'm going to go fast. We're almost done with these, Riza. I'm going to go fast on the rest. Are people able to stay another 10 minutes or do we have to end at 12 sharp? I mean, 12 for me. Perspective feels incomplete. Yes, again, exactly. You feel remote again from what you're looking at, right? Okay, you can see that she's giving something to drink to the child, but there's all this, again, unwanted space in the foreground and the background. The point of interest in the photo are the two people who are right in the middle, and they seem tiny compared to the size of the frame, right? So again, remember, if your photo is not good enough, it's because you're not close enough. And if you go to the next slide, Nara, see the difference here. It's the same story. It's a mother feeding a child who is malnourished. This photo, you actually see the child's face. You even see, you know, what he's given to eat. It's much stronger than the one before, right? So now I'm going to go, I think, really quickly on the next couple of slides. If you go to the next one, Nara, this photo, I'm putting it here because I find it, again, as we said, we're doing humanitarian photography, and very often we show people in need, we show people vulnerable, we show people powerless. And this photo is the exact opposite. You see a couple, they're like, holding each other, they are smiling, there's tenderness, there's love. This is also the case of the people we're working with, right? They go through all of this. They have, love stories and, families and stuff. So again, making sure that you incorporate this in the storytelling that you're doing about the people we're working with is really important. I also want to see that. When I see this photo, I actually want to know more about this couple. I'm like, oh, who are they? Why are they laughing? It's just a nice change from, what we usually see. If you go to the next slide. Same thing here, right? You see a woman reading a book in a tent as she's displaced. How often do you see people affected reading books in our photography? Not enough. You sometimes see children because they are studying, but how often do you see an adult woman reading a book in a tent? Very rarely, right? Again, so for me, this photo grabs my attention because it's not what I usually see in humanitarian photography, yet it is the reality of what the people are going through. Yes, people, this is in Haiti, affected by violence in Haiti, who have been displaced, are reading books in their tents. So we also need to be telling that story when we talk about what we do. I think you can go, Nara, like really quickly over the next one. Let's just move forward. Again, we don't have time. Go. Like that's the meeting photos we were talking about. Again, the fact that when you show visibility, you want to show people at the same level, listening to the people affected, engage with them. You want to see that power dynamic, that listening, etc. going on. The photo tips. So again, as we said, this is a bit of a summary. So you're going to have that with the presentation as we finish the session. It kind of gives you, kind of a summary of what we've been discussing. And as I said, the best way to improve your photography is just to look at as many photos as you can. If you go to the next slide, again, you'll have that as in the presentation. You don't take a photo, you make it. Again, remember that whenever you're taking a photo, you are framing the reality. It is you deciding what is it you're showing. So be really clear on what is your purpose and what is your message. If we go to the next slide. Again, a really good quote that I like, and that, if you can keep it at the back of your mind, don't shoot what it feels like, what it looks like, shoot what it feels like. As we said over and over again, we take photos to share our emotions, and a good photo will manage to transmit the emotion of the photographer to the viewer. So this is really, really, really important to keep in mind. So now if we go to the next part, which is ethics and consent, and we're going to have Nara, Riza is going to kill me because we're way over time. If you guys can stay a little bit longer, it's not going to be too long, but if you have an extra 5-10 minutes, I think we can, it would be great because we can finish, we could finish the presentation. So if we go to the next slide, Nara, what is dignity? Because, as we said at the beginning, this is what we're looking for in our images. We're looking for dignified images. So how do we define dignity? Dignity is, as you will all have noticed, a bit of a tricky word, and it has also become a bit of a buzzword, a bit like resilience, to be honest. We keep saying dignity, 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 but what does dignity look like? What is dignity? So as it says here, dignity doesn't mean that you show people at their best or looking good at all times. And this is really important because sometimes you do have to show a situation which is undignified, but it is not the person who is undignified, it is the situation they are in. But you still have to show this. So again, it's not that you just want happy, positive photos, not at all. You cannot whitewash or sanitize people's experiences, because that would in a way dishonor the trust that they put in us when they are allowing you to capture their experiences. So again, dignity is not about showing people at their best. And I love this photo actually that you see on the slide, because for me, it says it all. You've got these two women, and because of their attitude, they feel quite strong again and confident, right? The way they're posing. But at the same time, you see behind them, and the photo is cut on the slide, but behind them, you see the context, which is, a very makeshift tent in which they're living. So, you know, again, you show the situation they are living in, which is an undignified situation, but it's the situation and it's not the people. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Second thing is dignity means that you consider the person as a unique and complex human being. This is what we've been saying all along, also from the start of this presentation. Again, you know, dignity calls for complexity and nuance. This is what we were saying when we were saying that you also show people, you know, reading in their tent. You also show people, a couple, you know, holding hands. Again, the people you are photographing are unique human beings like you, and you need to be able to show their uniqueness. This is what is dignified. That means that, you know, to show their uniqueness, you need to show their personality, their strength, their aspirations. So you need to try to have all of this at the back of your mind when you're taking photos. You know, it is about telling their story, not a story which is based on stereotypes or based on your assumption of what they're going through. If we go to the next slide. Disaster images. So instead of dignity, this is what I often, you know, and I've put it here because this helps me a lot. And it did help me a lot as we were going through this journey of thinking through the ethical approach to our photography. Instead of dignity, it helps to think about responsibility. What is your responsibility to the people featured? Sometimes, you know, this really helps clarify. And I've put it here. I mean, I don't know if you guys are going to be confronted to that a lot in your work, but there's, you know, this whole issue of malnutrition photos. And we've taken an approach at Ocha, which is that we do not show horrific malnutrition photos ever, because we don't want to reinforce stereotypes to trigger empathy, like it feels exploitative. We do not want poverty porn. And so instead of, you know, doing this, what we do is we tell the person's story. So again, it goes back to this approach of uniqueness, of complexity, of nuance. You want to show the people being helped, you want to show the people being assisted, and you want to be able to tell the people's stories. If you go to the next slide, but again, I'm not sure this is too relevant for your work. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, Rizad, I'm not sure. But again, you know, this comes up a lot in the photos we receive, so it's in the presentation. You know, you do not show this photo, for example. Even if you do not show the child's face, we would never run this photo on Ocha platforms. Because even if you don't show the child's face, it is a horrific photo. And it does play into, you know, reinforcing certain stereotypes, because unfortunately, the horrible malnutrition photos you see are always from the same places in the world. And a lot of the crises we work in have, you know, issues around food security and malnutrition. So if we were to start showing these photos, we would show them all the time, all over, you know, all over our platforms, and this is not possible. So instead of showing this photo, if you go to the next slide, Nara, you show this photo, which is again a photo where you see the child being helped and you tell the child's story. So this photo will need to be accompanied by a proper caption, which says the name of the child, of the baby, what the baby has been going through, why he fell sick, what you know, what has the family gone through, have they been displaced, have they been affected by a, you know, natural disaster, whatever the situation is. You cannot use malnutrition photos without telling the people's stories. They cannot ever be used as just an illustration. Never, you know, really remember that, never ever. Informed consent. This is really, if we go to the next slide, Nara, this is really important. And this is at the core of everything that we are doing. Informed consent means that the person you are photographing not only agrees to have his or her photo taken, but they also understand the implications of having their photo taken. So it means they need to understand how, where, and for what purpose the photography is going to be used. They need to understand that. So informed consent is very different from simple consent. It is not a yes or no answer. It's not, can I take your photo? Yes. Can I take your photo? No. Informed consent is a process and is a discussion. You know, it means that the person needs to be able to say no. And it means, again, that you have explained to them, I'm going to take your photo. It's going to be used in maybe reports from outside. It's going to be used on social media. And even if the person, you know, sometimes you get to places where people don't have Instagram, don't have Facebook, they might not know exactly what that means. Well, you can explain it to them in a different way. You can tell them, if I take your photo, it means that 10,000 people will be able to see it, you know, from your country, from your community, from the world. It will be used in different, you know, you can find ways to explain to people what is it that we're going to do with the image. But this is really, really critical because it's, again, at the core of everything we do. Written consent forms do provide evidence of an agreement, but they're not a solution. It's not because you send a written consent form that it means you've got an informed consent. You know, I prefer, again, written consent is needed for very sensitive topics, sexual and gender-based violence, you know, child soldiers, etc. You will need written consent. But again, I much prefer to have, you know, you send photos and say, these are the photos I've taken. I have gone through explaining to the people what they have, you know, what it entails, and have no written consent forms. Like, you know, the key is, again, making sure that you as a photographer, you have gone through the explanation process. So again, you know, this is, again, another aspect of dignity that we were talking at the beginning. Dignity is not just the image itself. It's also the image making process. It means that it is the dialogue that goes into how you make the photos themselves. If we go to the next slide, the danger of stereotypes. This is really key as well. If you see this photo, actually, you know, it's a young girl carrying water. Again, it's like, you know, it's zoomed in on the slide, so you don't see the full photo. But like, if you were to see this photo, I mean, it's a good photo. Like, you see the child's face, you know, and again, if you were to see the full frame, it's a good photo. And you might say, yeah, I mean, that's a good photo. There's no problem with that photo. And indeed, there's no specific problem with that photo. But if you were to see that photo, and then another photo of a woman carrying water, and then another photo of a woman carrying water, and, you know, you will actually notice, the more you pay attention to this, that in a lot of our crises, we keep showing women carrying water and suffering as they carry water. The problem is not that this doesn't exist. It does exist. Women do carry water in a lot of the countries we work in. But if you constantly show women only as carrying water, this becomes a stereotype. And, you know, there is a great Nigerian writer called Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I don't know if you guys know her. She's a wonderful fiction writer from Nigeria, and she's also very committed on a lot of issues, gender, etc. She says this, and I'm going to read you her quote. Just give me a second. She says, if you show a people as one thing, and actually let me copy it in the, I'm going to copy it in the chat so you can read it as well as I'm reading it, because it's an amazing quote that to me summarizes it all. If you show people as one thing over and over again, this is what they become. If all we see is how poor people are, it becomes impossible to imagine them as anything else. Their poverty becomes the single story. The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they aren't true, it is that they are incomplete, and they make one story become the only story. And again, this goes back to a lot of things that we have discussed, and this is why, again, it's important to show a woman reading a book, a couple holding hands, you know, a father holding the child instead of a mother. It just, again, it shows you the, you know, it shows you the diversity, the complexity, the nuances in people's stories. And this is, again, really, really important to remember. Like, in a stereotypical image, the people become almost like props that symbolize something. While in an image which is not stereotypical, you actually feature the person as a unique individual with a unique, nuanced, and complex story. And this is, in terms of the storytelling we want to do, this is what we want to be doing more of. And this is what we should be all striving for. It's very difficult, but if you have this as an objective, your photography and your stories are going to look and feel and be written in very different ways. If we go to the next and final slide, and it's 12:06, so I'm only 6 minutes beyond time. Captions. If without a caption, a photo cannot be used. It cannot be searched in a database, it cannot be found, and it cannot be featured correctly. So it is your duty, whether, you know, as a photographer, as you know, whatever your role is, it is your duty as the photographer. And if you're working with photographers, it is your duty to remind the photographers you're working with that to make sure that every single image is accompanied by adequate information on, you know, who, what, where, why. So at the very least, a caption, as it says here, must include a location, a date, and a credit, which is the name of the photographer and the organization that the person is working for. That means that once you've taken your photos, this is only one part of the job. It's actually the funniest, the nicest part of the job. The second part of the job, which is just as critical, is that when you come back to your desk and to your computer, you offload your images, you make a selection of the best images, and then you write your captions, and then you upload to the database or you share with, you know, your focal point. And that is not the, you know, this is sometimes the most cumbersome part of the job, but it is just as crucial as taking photos. If you've just taken the photos, but you haven't captioned them properly, you might as well not have taken photos in the first place, because we will not be able to use them. We will not be able to archive them. Again, you know, you've got your focal point in the CBI network, and I think it's Lena. And if you go to the next slide, I think it says here, you know, send your photos with caption and credit to Lena. So, you know, Lena is your first port of entry, but then Lena shares these photos with us, with me at HQ, and then we select the best photos and we put them in the OCHA archive. And once they are in the OCHA archive, they can be used by all partners around the world for years. And again, you know, that's the beauty of photography, again, versus video, is that photography has a very long shelf life. The photos that you take today might very well be used in, you know, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, maybe. So, you know, please, please, please remember to caption and credit your photos accordingly and share them with Lena, because otherwise it would be a shame. You know, again, you've gone through the trouble of going to the field, of, you know, meeting people, of taking amazing photos. You know, you need to go to the end of the road and caption them properly. And again, it's a bit cumbersome, but it's absolutely crucial. So I think I'm going to stop here. We've covered everything, almost everything. I would love to hear from you if you have any questions, any feedback, anything that was not clear, anything that, you know, you want more information on. Please, please, you know, let me know. Let us know.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. Colleagues, I know we're at time, but or overtime, but and there was a mistake when we said that this is a 30-minute session, because no way this can fit in a 30-minute session.
No way.
But this is very important, because whenever we at CBI search for anything about private sector at the OCHA photo library, it's very hard. It's very hard for us to have showcase using a photo how businesses play a very critical role in when it comes to ensuring that the response is effective and efficient rather. So, but I'm gonna stop talking. Let's pause for a few minutes here, just to ask if you have any questions, and because I know that you have some questions here that we might want Charlotte to address. Charlotte, for your info, the networks represented here are focal points from Sri Lanka, the Asia Pacific Alliance for Disaster Management, as well as the network in the Philippines, the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation. Colleagues, let's pause a little bit, because I'm sure that you do have questions.
Questions or even feedback, anything that you didn't like, wasn't clear, whatever that is, please do share. It's really great to hear from you. Don't be shy.
Hi, Eliza and Charlotte. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, very well.
I have a question for Charlotte. So let's say we are taking a picture of a person and the lighting is not really good. Can we move the person to like a good lighting area? Is it like ethical to just like shift the person here and there to take the best shot?
That's a really good question, Savani. Thank you so much for asking it. Yes. So, you know, when I said it a bit, we didn't have enough time to go into details, but when we talked about informed consent, I said how humanitarian photography is a dialogue. It's a partnership, if you want. We are not the media. We are not arriving somewhere and just like snapping shots to tell, you know, our perspective of the story. We always want to make sure that the people we take photos of are happy with the story we tell. So in that sense, Savani, it means that if the lighting is not great, you could totally move the person. So it depends what the person is doing. If the person is actually doing something that she cannot do somewhere else, you're going to be in trouble, and then you cannot move the person. But if you want to take a portrait of the person, you can totally say, I would love to take a portrait of you. You know, do you agree? Blah, blah, blah. We're going to use it that way. The light here is not great. Is there another place that would make sense? I think this place over there would be beautiful. What do you think about it? Will you be comfortable standing there or sitting there and me taking your photo? And, you know, again, you discuss it with the person that you photograph. And then, and I didn't have time to stress that, but it's always great if you can show, and now all the digital cameras, you know, have this possibility, which was not the case 20 years ago. Show the person the photo you've taken of her or him. You know, be like, oh, this is the shot I've taken. Are you happy with it? You know, do you feel it represents you? Like, is there anything that you would want me to show differently, or anything else that, you know, you would want to convey? Again, it's not only dignified and it's not only ethical to do that, but it's also in your best interest, because the people that you feature know much more about the place than you do, and they know much more about, obviously, about their lives. So maybe when they see the photo, they're like, yeah, you know, I like it, but there's something that it doesn't show. It is, you know, it doesn't show me doing blah blah blah, or it doesn't show the part of my house where, you know, whatever, the hurricane destroyed the bedroom, whatever that is, you know. So the feedback that they give you will be really interesting for you to take into account in terms of the series of photographs you're going to be doing. So again, I hope that answered your question, Savani. But yes, to me, it's not a problem as long as the person is okay, and as long as you do not, it's not an action that the person is doing somewhere that they couldn't do somewhere else, you know, because then again, you would be transforming the reality. If the person is, you know, trying to cut down a tree, you cannot ask her to go somewhere else, obviously, but that's kind of obvious, right? But if it's a portrait, by all means, you know, and ask the person where they feel comfortable, where they would like to have their photo taken, you know, that's completely fine.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe let's see if there's one more question or comment or feedback from the floor before we conclude. All right. Well,
And
I know
also,
that there's
just to
Go
say,
ahead.
Riza, like if people are not willing to share anything now, you're also more than welcome to send an email. You know, if you think about something later on down the line that you want to ask me about, or any comment, you know, you can always share that through, you know, Riza and Nara, and, you know, they will pass it on to me. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have, you know, by responding to an email or anything, you know, like this. So please, you know, keep that in mind.
Absolutely, because even from our end, I know the conversation about, particularly when it comes to portraying people in need, in the way that we capture images, it's a deeper conversation. We've had questions as well from team members, from network partners too, on how do we actually do this in a manner that is responsible and inappropriate. I see a question from Rochelle in the chat, just the queue. There you go.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Rochelle. Thank you for asking it. So, and it's good because I haven't mentioned this, so thank you for asking. Informed consent can be done before you take the photo or after. That's not a problem. So indeed, as you say, if it's a very difficult, chaotic situation, you might not have time to engage in this conversation before you take the photos, because that's going to make you miss the action. So, you know, people have ways, first of all, obviously, of making you understand whether they're happy for you to photograph them. So that would be the first reaction. They would be like, no, they would be yes, they would be smiling. So already you will have a couple of, you know, cues in terms of, are they okay with being photographed? So you go on, it's chaotic, you take your photos. Once you've taken your photos, and if you have focused on specific individuals especially, you go back to them after and you're like, hey, I've taken a number of photos of you. I just want to make sure that you will be happy for me to use them in again. And then you explain that context for that purpose, etc. And you get your informed consent post facto. If the person post facto tells you, no, I'm not happy, then you delete the photos you've taken, right? But again, you can do it before or after, it doesn't matter. Sometimes, there's one case scenario when it's almost impossible to get informed consent. And it is indeed if you're like, in an extremely chaotic situation, people, going into different places, nobody having time to chat or to discuss. In that case, again, the informed consent thing again is like, it's like you have to be sensible, right? So if the case, it happened like recently in Congo, we had refugees crossing the border as a flow. There's no way you can gonna get informed consent. You had a flow of people crossing, it was chaotic, it was, there was no way of getting informed consent for the photographer. So again, the only thing we could do was relying on the verbal, non-verbal cues that the people gave the photographer. And then what we did was not focusing on just one person. So if you don't have informed consent, we won't be able to use close-ups. We will only be able to use, kind of a generic shot of a scene, which is like, something unfolding. Again, refugees crossing the border, you would take a couple of generic shots. Nobody is like being focused on being, people, you can recognize them, but nobody is being really focused on. And that's the only way you can go about it. But again, in that, thankfully doesn't happen too often. In like 95% of cases, you are able to have a quick discussion with the person before or after taking the photos, but it can totally be after taking the photos.
Thanks,
I hope
Char.
that, yeah,
And-
great.
And Rochelle, again, I'm sorry to be the bad guy here, trying to move us forward, because it really is an informative and exciting discussion. I have my own questions myself, but maybe just to reinforce what Charlotte said, if you do have colleagues, if you do have questions and even feedback, do share it with us. We'd make sure to pass it along. Charlotte, if you have some additional tips, references, additional information practical tips that you'd also want to share, that will be helpful too. But to everyone, thank you. I'm just gonna end our session today by flipping the quote that Charlotte said, that if you show up people as one thing over and over again, this is what they become. I'm gonna flip it and make it a little bit positive, because I think the aim of CBI is to really show to the world, CBI and our private sector networks, our partners on the ground who define our strength. If we show humanitarian agencies or the humanitarian sector that this is what we can do as private sector actors who are willing, able, and ready to work with governments and humanitarian agencies when it comes to ensuring that the most vulnerable and affected are reached, then I guess it's a wonderful story to tell the world. And then hopefully we'd get to support you even better, and support you more in ensuring that we get to share this collective success story of the power of private sector to a wider audience. Everyone, thank you so much. We will be in touch when it comes to next steps. And we will be sharing with you a recording as well as links and references, additional information. But join me in thanking Charlotte. And at the same time, thank you as well, everybody, for joining us for this session. Take care, and we'll see each other again. Have a good day,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. And again, don't hesitate. Any questions, we're here. Bye.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, bye.